So to finish off with VLOOKUP, there's a couple of just tips I wanted to add in. So the first thing is sometimes you'll have a situation where you're looking up something in another data source and that lookup doesn't exist. That value doesn't exist in that first column, but it's a valid value, right? So for example, I sort of modified the sales example from up here. So I've got the same sales data, right? John, Tom, Jenny, Mary, right? All their sales information. But let's say we hired as a sales executive, we hired two new employees this month, and now included in the report I build is now Joe and Jim, right? So I'm still building the same report where I'm showing Mary's data. And I'm maybe showing other people's data, but now I'm showing Joe and Jim. But Joe and Jim hadn't exist; they haven't done any sales because they just got hired. When you do a lookup in that table, right, it's going to show as zero. But I still need a report on Joe and Jim. And so the way that we can sort of account for errors, if they're just valid, if they're valid values, but they just aren't listed in the data set, is we can add an if error statement before the VLOOKUP, so we can sort of nest a formula inside a formula. We're nesting VLOOKUP inside an if error formula to say if there is an error that occurs, like I trust my data, right? The error is just that there was no value in here. If an error occurs, I want you to do something else. I want you to set this cell to something else. So the formula for that is if error. So you would add before your VLOOKUP if error. And an if error formula essentially has two parameters. The first parameter is your actual formula, right? So in our case, it's just a VLOOKUP formula. And then the second parameter is what happens if that formula generates an error. So in this scenario, I've appended if error to the formula, and then I say if there is an error, just make it zero, right? Because they wouldn't have had any sales because they're just new employees. So to prevent your, if this was 10,000 rows of data, and a good chunk of them was these errors, it kind of looks funky in your report and your data set. And so use if error to designate what happens if the lookup value doesn't exist in your lookup row in your lookup column. So yeah, for that I just set these at zero, and now in the report, it'll just say zero, and then over here I can make a comment, in another cell or something like that in the report and just say like new employee or something like that, right? Just to designate why there were zero sales. So that's one thing to keep in mind. I'll show you that here in real time with the practice. So let's say, for example, we had another page that we just added to our website called slash testimonials, right? I just built the testimonials page. So it doesn't have a whole lot of data with it. Maybe there's one here, or maybe there was like one session, one user, 100% bounce rate because it was just a brand new page, and average session duration of 10 seconds because it was just, I just built it, right? Get some formatting going here. So now when I do that VLOOKUP evaluation, right, now I'm going to get errors all the way down. But this testimonials page. This is a valid page. It's new. There's no data on it yet, right? Google Search Console hadn't seen any data on it. So I could, instead of presenting this in my report and having people say, "Hey, what's up with these errors that I'm in here?" I could add that if error statement before. So I can say, so I can make the screen a little bit bigger. So I can say if error, right? I still have my evaluation. So if error open parentheses, right? First parameter is what is my formula, right? So that's that. And then I just add a second parameter. What's going to happen if I create an error? And I just set that to zero. Now if I copy that all the way down, now that creates that to be zero instead of an error. And then I can do that for the rest as well. So we'll say if error, set that to zero. I'll copy that down. If error here, and then if it is an error, set that to zero. That broke some of my formatting, changed it from a number to a percentage. So I'm just going to go back to format number, change it to percent, and then same thing here. If error, and then add a 0. So now I have clean data, right? Now I can say, hey, it's just a new page, but having no information here is fine. Like we'll just mark that as 0. So that's the one tip I want to have, and then another sort of advanced tip. So what happens sometimes is um, you'll get a data set. So in this case, for example, like Google Search Console or Google Analytics, or from some API or some internal data set, right, that you have, maybe your internal CRM. And sometimes what happens is the columns will change for whatever reason, right? Like you do an export from, for example, from your internal CRM, and for some reason, clicks, in this example, clicks may move to um, column 3 instead of column 2, right? And then impressions becomes column 2 instead of column 3. Well, in our formulas, we've been using those column numbers to do that. So we've been saying, oh, I did the wrong one. Excuse me. This one here. Yep. So yeah. So in our example, we've been using column numbers to specify where clicks, impressions, click-through rate, and average position are. But if my next export, if I try to rebuild this report again, and my next export of Google Search Console has those two flipped, now my data's off. Right now, it's showing 2,000 clicks and 88 impressions. Right. That doesn't make sense at all. And so sometimes if that happens, what you'll want to do is switch from um, uh, using the column number as a designator of where data is, to actually saying, I want you to look for the heading clicks, right? And set that as a column, right? So instead of saying 2 as that third parameter, we would say essentially look for clicks. And wherever clicks is, that's the data that I want to pull. So the way that you do that is with adding to your VLOOKUP this match statement. If we were to, well, we'll go through it first, and then I'll talk a little bit more about it. So in this example, we have Mary, we're looking up her sales, right? And typically we would say in that third parameter, look for column 3, right? But this time we're going to say, hey, look for the word sales in my heading, and then find that information, right? Use that as your column. So this match formula as the third parameter is how you do that. So we do the structure for it is match, open parentheses, and then the first thing is what word in your heading are you looking for? Which heading are you looking for? So we're saying in quotes sales, right? So text item. And then there's three parameters there. So the first one is the heading. The second parameter is what row, where is the heading data, right? What row has the heading data? So for us, it's in this table, it's C7, or excuse me, B73, and that's actually we're on one. So let's update that here. So it's actually B. Keep doing VB 73 to D 73. Sorry about that. So yeah, so it's going to be this sort of line here. B73 to D73 has our data. You can see in the actual formula I did that, but for whatever reason I had it wrong up here. So yeah, so parameter 1, what is the heading? Parameter 2, where is the heading located? What is that first row, right? So B73 to D73. And then the last parameter is, again, an exact or partial match type of scenario. 0 is exact. I think 1 is partial. Don't quote me on that. Let me actually look that up and see what that last parameter is. Yeah. Yep. So yeah, 0 is the exact match, and then 1 and I guess -1 or blank is an approximate match. Again, I've never used approximate, so I was just sticking to 0 as exact match, and then you would finish off your VLOOKUP formula with the false for the exact match for the VLOOKUP. So again, three parameters in your match statement. So first parameter is the heading that you want to look up. So sales in quotes. The second parameter is the range of your headings, not the range of the entire table, right? You've already done that here in your VLOOKUP in that second parameter. But the range of your heading, right? So in this case, it's B73 to D73. And then the last value is exact or approximate match. You would just always do exact and set it to 0 for exact, and then finish off your VLOOKUP formula. So now that allows me to look up sales, right? Look up that column, and if I was to switch this from column two to column, or excuse me, column three to column two, like I would still get this $90,000 number. So again, let's look at this in practice. So we use this example tab here. So again, we switch the example data to have impressions be the first one, or excuse me, impressions be column two, clicks be column three, versus originally clicks was column two, impressions was column three. So that threw our data off. So to put it back, or to at least look up the headings instead of the column numbers, make this a little bit bigger here. I'm going to change this third parameter. So this third parameter right now is just the number two for the column. I'm going to embed I'm going to embed a match statement inside of it, or nest a match statement inside of it. So I'm going to match colon. I'm going to look for, so this is my clicks column. So I'm going to look for the word clicks. I'm going to say where clicks are located in my data set. So it's going to be this data here. So A1 to E1. I'm going to make that an absolute value because that's not going to change likely. The other option as well, instead of just dragging and selecting the exact data, like for example, let's say Google Search Console added in sessions to their data, and then move clicks all the way to the end. If you just use this absolute range, you may not catch it. So what I actually like to do, if this is only one data set in my sheet, then I'll actually just select the whole column. When you do that, now it changes from like A1 to E1 to just one of one, right? Column, or excuse me, row one of ones. And select the entire row, excuse me. So selecting row one of one. And I can make that, again, an absolute value so it doesn't jump to 2 to 3 when I copy it down. But that is typically what I'll do, is I'll just select the entire row. And then the last parameter of match is going to be true or false, or excuse me, exact match or approximate match. 0 for exact match, so I'll set that to 0. And then I'll close off that formula, right? I've now closed off the match formula. And then now I should be good to go. So if I select that and press enter, now my clicks turn to 88. And then because I've got all the absolute values all set up properly, I should be able to set that, copy paste that down. And now I have my clicks. And then I'll do the same thing for impressions. So instead of 3 as my numbers, excuse me, make it a little bit bigger here. Instead of 3 as my number, I'll set a match statement. So match, I'm looking for the word impressions. I'm saying my data is here. Make sure that's an absolute. And now add that third parameter of 0, close off that nested formula, and now it should grab impressions, right? So now no matter where I move impressions or clicks, the data is going to be accurate at that point. Something else to keep in mind, like I said, if you have issues where like data moves around on your like export or something like that, use the match statement to look for the specific heading that you want to look up. So that's a critical one. You can actually see. I'll show you sort of what this actually evaluates out to. If I was to take this match formula and just like separate it out and just do it on its own, so I'm going to do equal match impressions. It gives me a value of 2. So it's actually the same as saying VLOOKUP A5, comma, my range, comma 2, right? This evaluates out to 2, right? And then false, right? That's really what this is doing. Is saying what column number is this impressions column, right? And then it essentially adds the number 2 to my formula for me. So it's like a dynamic way of building this formula.